There was something Rosie had been holding back, and this time, she finally decided to ask Taeha directly. As the two stood together, she gathered enough courage to ask whether there was already someone in his life. Taeha didn't answer immediately. Instead, her question pulled an old memory back into his mind, one involving Haesu and the secret relationship they had once shared. Back then, Taeha had asked Haesu whether keeping their relationship hidden from everyone was really what she wanted. She had quietly agreed, but remembering those days only made the situation more complicated. The meetings with the director, the times they went around together, and all the moments that had made them look like a couple had never been what Taeha himself wanted. Now, standing in front of Rosie, he made that clear in his own cold way. He told her that she was surprisingly good at clinging to a man who hated that kind of behavior, almost as if she enjoyed making things difficult for him. With that, the two finally went their separate ways. But even after Rosie walked away, she couldn't stop thinking about Taeha. She glanced back at him and came to one uncomfortable conclusion. Whoever this mysterious woman was, she must have been someone Taeha genuinely cared about. And judging from everything Rosie had seen, that woman was probably a beautiful 34-year-old Ajumma. That suspicion reminded Rosie of an earlier conversation with Mikasa. The two women had been talking about Taeha, and Rosie had pointed out how freely he seemed to say whatever came to mind. Strangely enough, that bluntness made him seem sincere rather than fake. Mikasa had questioned who Rosie was talking about, and Rosie explained that when a man genuinely falls for someone, his idea of an ideal woman usually becomes strangely specific. Now, after watching Taeha walk away, Rosie couldn't shake the feeling that there really was someone fitting that description in his life. Elsewhere, Taeha sat alone in a dark room overlooking the city. A bottle of alcohol and a glass rested nearby while the room remained almost completely silent. Then his phone rang. The man on the other end reported that everything had gone exactly as expected. The target had made the first move after backing away appropriately, and he had been watched carefully the entire time. He had already returned home safely, and there appeared to be no further movement from his side. But there was one problem. Since the eldest young master now believed that the man on the phone had been completely won over, continuing to watch the situation personally would risk exposing him. The safest choice was to assign someone else to take over the surveillance. Taeha listened quietly, already expecting something like this to happen. In Taeha's mind, the reason was obvious. Despite appearing carefree and almost reckless on the surface, the man they were watching was extremely cautious about crossing the line around someone whose intentions remained unclear. There was no telling what he knew or how closely he might be watching them in return. And because he was the kind of person who would rather suffer than become disliked, he would move with extreme caution. Taeha understood that the only option was to continue exactly as they had been doing. For Taeha, enduring the situation was the only way forward. He had chosen to remain close to Haesu until the moment she truly needed him, and coming to this place without her had been the right decision. His thoughts drifted toward Mincheol, remembering how he had stepped away from Haesu just as Taeha was doing now. The decision was painful, but Taeha had no intention of allowing Haesu to become exhausted by a love that had no power to change their circumstances. He knew there was only so much he could hold on to, and only so much he could obtain before everything slipped away again. One day, while looking at a large advertisement in the middle of the city, his eyes had fallen upon a beautiful model wearing a wedding dress. For a moment, the woman in the poster became Haesu in his imagination. The image was enough to reveal what he had been trying to hide from himself. Deep down, Taeha had never wanted to leave her behind and come here in the first place. Meanwhile, Haesu was going through the difficult process of moving out. As she packed her belongings, memories of her time with Taeha kept returning one after another. She had originally believed leaving would be easy because the place was filled with so many painful memories. There should have been no reason to miss it. Yet once the moment of departure actually arrived, the affectionate memories began surfacing instead, making it much harder to let go. Money only made the situation worse. Hiring a professional moving service was far too expensive, so Haesu had to handle the move with help from others. As she carried the bag, one of the movers worried that she might hurt herself, so he handed her something much lighter to carry instead. Even during the chaos of moving, Haesu couldn't help worrying about the people helping her. She offered to order black bean noodles because they must have been hungry, but the mover immediately refused and revealed that Taeha had already taken care of the food. That small detail hit Haesu harder than expected. Even after everything that had happened between them, Taeha's concern was still appearing in the smallest parts of her daily life. As she settled into the new home, those traces became impossible to ignore. Out of habit, she found herself arranging Taeha's clothes, placing the photograph they had taken together somewhere she could see it, and even writing down the day he was supposed to return. Then, 13 hours later, her phone received a message from him asking whether she had been eating and sleeping properly. Haesu tried her best to take care of herself, almost as though doing so would somehow allow her well-being to reach him wherever he was. That summer, Seoul was trapped beneath heavy humidity. The tropical night air felt felt thick enough to drown in, and even the pouring rain couldn't wash away the heat. Yet for Haesu, the weather only made Taeha come to mind more often. The coolness she remembered from him seemed almost impossible to forget, and in the middle of the rain she found herself missing him all over again. The story then returned to a party where Taeha and Rosie happened to be in the same room. Rosie sat on the sofa with a drink in her hand, while Taeha stood nearby, equally composed. From a distance, Jay watched the two of them and immediately became uncomfortable. In his mind, Rosie seemed far too relaxed for someone who had been blatantly ignored by Taeha for weeks. She was still smiling as though nothing had happened, and Jay couldn't understand how she could maintain that attitude. To Jay, the situation was dangerous. If everyone continued seeing Rosie beside Taeha, while Taeha kept treating her coldly, people might eventually start viewing Taeha as the villain. Jay couldn't stand the thought. He even convinced himself that he had to prevent the two from meeting again, no matter how troublesome that became. While Jay was lost in those thoughts, Mikasa suddenly approached him. Her teasing immediately caught him off guard when she suggested that he should restrain his master a little. Jay was visibly confused by the way she referred to Taeha, especially since Taeha wasn't even his employer. But when Mikasa pointed out that the distinction hardly mattered, Jay reluctantly admitted that she had a point. Mikasa then admitted that her friend's background wasn't something anyone could simply ignore. She couldn't understand why someone with his position would give Rosie such an extreme cold shoulder. Even if nobody dared say it aloud, she suspected that plenty of people secretly found his behavior obnoxious. Jay remembered how things had been back in college, when girls constantly surrounded Taeha, while many of the other guys couldn't stand him. In Jay's opinion, Taeha didn't even need to act arrogant to make people resent him. His mere presence was enough. Still, Mikasa couldn't shake the feeling that something about Taehee and Rosie was wrong. The atmosphere between them was simply too strange. Before Jay could properly respond, the attention shifted back toward Rosie, who was approached by another guest at the party. The guest wanted to know whether Rosie and Taeha had appeared together as partners that day. Rosie explained that she had been rejected, yet that she couldn't understand why he would supposedly prefer a woman many years older than himself. The conversation quickly turned toward the consequences of such a relationship, especially within the Taeseong family. If Taeha truly chose an older woman and eventually married her, she believed it could create serious problems for the family's future. Before the conversation could go any further, Taeha suddenly stepped forward. His attention settled on Yoonzeo, and he calmly asked him to speak privately for a moment. The request immediately changed the atmosphere,